No one knew who he really was. To everyone, he was just another worker trying to survive the day. Until one simple act changed everything. In that brief moment, something inside him shifted. This is the story of a man who pretended to be poor and discovered the true meaning of kindness. His name was Michael, a man who had everything the world said mattered, but felt he had nothing that truly did. At 38 years old, Michael Carter sat alone in his penthouse overlooking the glittering city skyline, surrounded by luxury that felt increasingly hollow. The leather furniture, the abstract art worth more than most people's homes. The floor-to-ceiling windows, all of it felt like a beautiful prison. For years, he had built an empire inherited from his father, expanding Carter Industries into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Board meetings, acquisitions, charity galas where people smiled too wide and praised too loud. Yet deep down, in the quiet moments between one success and the next, he wondered a question that haunted him. Did the people around him care for who he was or what he had? His father had warned him once, years before he passed. Money reveals people, son. It shows you who they really are. And sometimes that's the loneliest discovery you'll ever make. Michael hadn't understood then. But now, sitting alone in his glass tower, he understood perfectly. So one day, after another hollow birthday celebration where every gift felt like a transaction, he decided to disappear. No suits, no luxury car, no bodyguards or assistants, just a backpack, a phone with no contacts, and a new name, Mike. He rented a small studio apartment on the edge of town, the kind with peeling paint and a radiator that clanked at night. He bought secondhand clothes from a thrift store. He took a small job delivering food in the suburbs, wearing plain clothes, a worn-out cap, and carrying an insulated bag that smelled faintly of fried rice. For the first time in his adult life, he felt invisible. And strangely, wonderfully free. The first delivery was to a suburban house with a manicured lawn and a BMW in the driveway. Michael, now Mike, knocked on the door, holding a bag of Thai food. A middle-aged man in golf clothes opened it, barely glancing at him. "You're late," the man snapped, grabbing the bag. "I ordered this 40 minutes ago. I'm sorry, sir. Traffic was—" The door slammed in his face. Mike stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. No tip, no thank you, not even eye contact. He walked back to his beat-up bicycle, his new vehicle, and checked his phone. 3 more deliveries, $12 in tips so far. Most people didn't even look him in the eyes. Some shouted when orders were late, their voices sharp with entitlement. Others simply took their food and closed the door, as if he were a vending machine that walked. One woman counted her change in front of him, frowned, and said, "I guess you'll have to settle for this," before handing him 2 crumpled dollar bills. Another man complained that his fries were cold, even though Mike had pedaled as fast as he could through rush hour traffic. "Do you people even care about quality?" The man sneered. Mike wanted to say something, wanted to remind them that you people were human beings doing honest work. But he didn't. He just nodded, apologized, and moved on. By the end of the first week, his feet ached, his legs burned, and his soul felt bruised. But something inside him had shifted. He was beginning to see the world as it really was. But one morning, everything changed. It was a Tuesday. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. Mike had just finished a breakfast delivery, scrambled eggs and coffee to a businessman who answered the door while yelling into his phone, barely acknowledging Mike's existence. His next order was to a small, cozy house at the edge of town. The lawn was modest but cared for. A small garden with tomatoes and sunflowers grew along the side. The house itself looked warm, lived in, loved. Mike knocked on the door. A woman opened it. Her name, he would soon learn, was Anna. She had kind eyes, the kind that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore blue scrubs with a hospital ID badge clipped to her pocket. She smiled, a real smile, not the polite kind people give service workers. "Good morning," she said brightly. Oh, thank you so much. You must be exhausted riding around in this heat. Mike blinked, caught off guard. It's fine. Just doing my job. Well, you're doing a great job, she said warmly. Then she disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a cold glass of water and a small bag. Here, take this. I made extra cookies last night. Chocolate chip. And you look like you could use some hydration. Mike stared at the water, at the cookies, at this woman who was treating him like a person. Are you okay? She asked gently, noticing his silence. No one had ever asked him that before. Not in this life. Not in his old one either, really. Yeah, he said, his voice a little rough. Thank you, really, she smiled again. Have a wonderful day, Mike. She'd read his name off the app. But the way she said it, like it mattered, made something inside him crack open. That small act of kindness lit a spark inside him. Days turned into weeks. Mike delivered to Anna's house several times. Each time, she greeted him with the same warmth. She lived alone, he learned, working double shifts as a nurse at the nearby hospital. Her smile never faded, even when she looked bone-tired, dark circles under her eyes. She always had something kind to say. Don't forget to eat, okay? I know you delivery folks skip meals. You're doing great, you know. I see you out there rain or shine. I hope people are treating you well today. Mike started looking forward to her orders. Her kindness made the world a little lighter, a little less cruel. One afternoon, he arrived during her day off. She was in her garden, dirt on her knees, planting something. Mike, she called out, waving. Perfect timing. I just made lemonade. Want some? He hesitated. I shouldn't. I have other deliveries. 5 minutes, she insisted gently. You deserve a break. They sat on her porch sipping lemonade. She told him about her patients, about a little boy who'd beaten cancer, about an elderly man who held her hand and thanked her before he passed. Why do you do it? Mike asked. The job sounds hard. It is, she admitted. But if I can make someone's worst day a little bit better, that's worth everything. Mike looked at her, really looked at her. Here was someone who made a fraction of what he used to spend on a single dinner. Someone who worked until she was exhausted. Someone who had every reason to be bitter. And yet, she radiated a kind of wealth he'd never possessed. But not everyone was like her. One rainy afternoon, Mike stopped by a restaurant to pick up an order, an upscale Italian place called Bellissimo. He'd been there before in his old life, hosting business dinners. The owner was Richard Castellano, one of Michael's former business partners and golf buddies. When Mike walked in, dripping from the rain, Richard was at the counter. Arguing with the kitchen staff, "Where's the delivery guy?" Richard barked. "That's me," Mike said quietly, pulling out his phone to confirm the order. Richard glanced at him with barely concealed disgust. "You're 15 minutes late." The rain slowed traffic. "I'm sorry. You delivery guys are always late. Can't you do anything right?" Richard's voice rose, attracting attention from the dining area. A few customers turned to look. One smirked. Another shook his head, whispering something to his companion. Mike felt heat rise to his face, not from anger, but from shame. The shame of being shouted at in public. The shame of being seen as less than. He quietly apologized again, took the order, and walked out into the storm. As he rode his bike away, rain mixing with something else on his face, his phone buzzed. Another order, Anna again. When Anna opened the door and saw him soaked to the bone, shivering, her face immediately filled with concern. "Oh my God, Mike. Come in right now." "I'm fine, really? You're not fine. You're soaking wet." She pulled him gently inside, disappeared, and returned with a thick towel and a hoodie. "Here, dry off. I'm making you tea. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said firmly but kindly. "I want to. Now sit." Mike sat on her couch, wrapped in the towel, holding a mug of hot tea she'd pressed into his hands. "You shouldn't be out in this storm," she said softly, sitting across from him. "No job is worth risking your health." He smiled, trying to hide the lump in his throat. "It's just part of the job." "No," she said, looking him directly in the eyes. "Being kind is part of my job. Being human should be part of everyone's. That night, after he'd dried off and left, Mike couldn't stop thinking about her words. Being human should be part of everyone's. When had he lost that? In his old life, when had he stopped seeing the people around him as human beings? The next week, Mike decided to test something that had been nagging at him. He visited one of his company's branches, Carter Industries' regional office, still in disguise, still wearing his delivery clothes. He walked in and asked the receptionist if they were hiring for janitor positions. The young woman at the desk looked him up and down, her nose wrinkling slightly. Let me check." She picked up her phone, but Mike heard her whisper to someone, "There's a guy here asking about janitorial work. He looks questionable." A manager came out, Jenkins, someone Michael had personally promoted 2 years ago. "Can I help you?" Jenkins asked, arms crossed. "I'm looking for work, janitorial or maintenance." Jenkins looked him over with barely concealed disdain. "You don't look like someone who belongs here. This is a professional environment." From behind Jenkins, other employees gathered, whispering. "He smells like cheap food," one muttered. "Probably hasn't showered in days." Another laughed quietly. No one offered him a seat. No one offered him respect. These were his employees, people whose salaries he paid, whose careers he'd built, and they treated him like dirt. Mike was about to leave when he heard a familiar voice. "Mike? What are you doing here?" Anna. She happened to be at the building. For a health screening program her hospital was running for corporate employees. She recognized him immediately, walking over with concern on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, ignoring the stares from the others. "Just trying something new," he said, forcing a smile. She didn't press. She didn't judge. She just looked at him with empathy, the kind that sees beyond appearances, beyond circumstances. "Well, good luck," she said warmly, squeezing his arm gently before heading to her appointment. When Mike left that building, something inside him broke. The people who worked for him, who praised him when he wore expensive suits and made them money, now treated him like he was invisible. But Anna, she treated everyone the same, rich or poor, CEO or delivery man. She saw people. She saw him. A few days later, Mike returned to his real world. He walked back into his penthouse, stood in front of the mirror, and barely recognized himself. His face was tanned from hours in the sun. His hands were calloused. His eyes looked different, less empty, more awake. Suit back on, car back in the garage, mansion back to being a mansion. But Michael Carter wasn't the same man who'd left. He called his assistant. "Schedule 2 meetings for tomorrow. Richard Castellano at 10 a.m. and find a woman named Anna Rodriguez. She's a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Invite her to a meeting at 11 a.m. Tell her it's regarding a charitable foundation opportunity." "Yes, sir. May I ask?" "No," Michael said simply. "Just arrange it." The next morning, Richard walked into Michael's office with his usual confidence, expensive suit perfectly tailored, cologne announcing his arrival. He froze when he saw who was sitting behind the CEO's desk. "Michael?" he stammered, face going pale. Michael leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. He didn't smile. "Hello, Richard. I thought you were away, on some kind of sabbatical?" "I was. Testing something." Richard's eyes darted around nervously. "Testing what?" "People. Humanity. Whether the world I built was worth the foundation it stood on." Richard laughed nervously. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" Michael stood up slowly. "Last week you screamed at a delivery man in your restaurant, called him incompetent, humiliated him in front of your customers." Richard's face went white. I was having a bad day. You know how it is." "That was me, Richard." Silence. "You always told me," Michael continued quietly, "that people show their true faces when no one's watching, when there's no benefit to being kind. You were right." "Michael, I'm sorry, I didn't know." "That's exactly the point." Michael cut him off, his voice like ice. You didn't know, so you felt free to treat another human being like garbage. Because what's a delivery person to you? Nobody, right? Richard opened his mouth, closed it. Our partnership is over, Michael said flatly. I'm buying you out. You'll receive fair market value, but I want you gone from any business associated with my name. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Richard left the office, his footsteps echoing down the hall. 15 minutes later, Anna arrived. She walked into the grand office hesitantly, clearly out of her element. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn purse, her nurse's badge still clipped to it. When she saw Michael behind the desk, her face registered confusion. I think there's been a mistake, she said. I'm looking for someone about a foundation position. Michael stood up. No mistake, Anna. She stared at him. Really stared. Mike? He nodded slowly. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. You're Michael Carter? I am. She sank into a chair, processing. The delivery job. You were testing people? Not intentionally. Not at first. He came around the desk, sitting in the chair next to her instead of across from her. I just wanted to disappear, to see the world as it really is, not through the filter of wealth. And it's cruel, he said quietly. Most of it. People are cruel when they think there's no consequence, when they think someone is beneath them. Anna looked down at her hands. But you weren't, Michael continued, his voice softer now. You saw a person, just a person trying to make it through the day. You offered water, cookies, shelter from the rain. You asked if I was okay. Tears welled in her eyes. That's just being decent. That's my point exactly, Michael said. It should be, but it isn't. Not in the world I built. He pulled out a folder and slid it across to her. I want to start a foundation, helping delivery workers, low-income families, people the world overlooks. I want you to lead it. Anna's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the documents. This budget? Michael, this is millions. You'll change hundreds of lives. Why me? She whispered. Because you saw me when no one else did. Because you're the richest person I've ever met, and you don't have a fraction of my money. Anna wiped her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The way she had when he was just Mike the delivery guy. And she smiled through her tears. Yes. Months later, Anna's program had changed hundreds of lives. The Human First Initiative provided healthcare, education grants, and support systems for delivery workers, janitors, nurses, and anyone society had labeled less than. And Michael? He kept that beat-up bicycle in his office as a reminder. He still delivered food once a month. Anonymously, to remember, to stay grounded. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are found in the poorest moments. Kindness, he once said in an interview, sitting next to Anna, who'd become not just his foundation director, but his closest friend, isn't something money can buy. It's something the soul gives for free. And the strange thing, Anna added with a smile, is that the more you give it away, the wealthier you become. Michael looked at her and knew she was right. He'd spent years building an empire, but she'd taught him how to build a life.